Hey guys, my name's Caitlin and welcome back to my channel. First off, I do just want to say apologies for not uploading anything last week. That was very bad scheduling on my part, and also I was just so swamped with trying to make sure that the new releases for the website went well and kind of forgot about my YouTube channel for a little bit there. But we are back, albeit with a little bit of a late wrap up, but we're back nonetheless. While I mentioned it though, a little bit of a shameless plug for the website. I did have a bunch of new releases go live on Friday last week. If you guys are interested, it was a bunch of Saxon, James and Eden Finley books. We had Frat Wars, the CU Hockey series, Her Never Just Friends series. What else did we have? Her Loves a Gamble duo. If you live in Australia and you want to get your hands on some Saxon James books, click the link in the description. Anyway, let's move on. We are finally getting into our March wrap up. Now I'm gonna be completely honest, I haven't looked at any of the books that I read in March. I can barely remember what I read last week, let alone last month. So this is gonna be a bit of a surprise for the both of us. We have 17 books to talk about today, plus one that I DNF'd, but I feel like I should mention it anyway. First up, we have Moth by Mayne. This is book 5 in her Monstrous series and the most recent release in this series as well. And I absolutely loved it. I gave it 5 stars because how could I give anything Mayne writes any less than 5 stars? What did we mark this as? This is an enemies to lovers, failed casual relationship. It made its way onto my favorites list of 2022. Features a first time scene, it's a grumpy sunshine romance, features monster human relationships obviously, and also one of my favorite scenes, a protagonist gets injured scene. Those are all of the tropes, themes that feature in this book. You think with how many wrap-ups I've done I would have the hang of it by now, but I really don't. I absolutely adored this book, and I do want to point out as well that it is a dual point of view. It's not every other chapter that we swap, but there are definitely a few chapters from Moth's perspective in there, which I thought was so unique because all of her other books you read solely from the human character's perspective. Maybe there might be like 1 or 2 random point of views chucked in there, but this one was actually quite a few shifts between Moth and Charlie's point of views, which I loved. Are you kidding? Getting to read from Moth's point of view about Charlie? More, please, thank you. I kind of forgot I read about this, not gonna lie. This is Dirty Slide by Lauren Blakely and Katie Casey. I gave this book 3 stars. I really expected to love it, not gonna lie. Like, the whole thing was that you have 2 Major League Baseball players, I want to say. Yeah, the fact that I can barely remember what happens in this book kind of speaks volumes, doesn't it? I think they're Major League Baseball players. They play on opposite teams and they're both attracted to one another, but like one of them is kind of flirting and the other one's like, I'm gonna indulge, but like not actually gonna act on it. And the blurb promised this whole thing where there was going to be this giant kiss that we got that was so passionate, and they're like, you know what, fuck it, we're just gonna see where this thing goes. And I feel like that's really not what we got, and I was rather disappointed because I feel like it just sounded so good. You know those books where you're like, I want to love this, and it sounds amazing and you can't wait to get into it, and then you do and it's really not as great as you thought it was going to be. This was one of those. It's also a novella. It's not a full-length novel as well. It's rather short. Let's see, what did I write here? I said, I didn't feel like we got the chance to connect with either of our characters. I didn't expect baseball to play a major role. I did think it would take a backseat to the romance, but at the same time, I thought it would be mentioned a bit more than it was, considering they're both professional athletes. Despite only being a novella, I did think it was rather rushed. And the filthy post-game kiss that was mentioned in the blurb didn't actually happen, so it was a bit of an oversell in my opinion. So that was definitely disappointing since I love Lauren Blakely's books, but you know, not every book is going to be to everyone's tastes. This just wasn't mine, so moving on. And the next book that I read in March was The Bromance Zone, also by Lauren Blakely, and also gave this one 3 stars. I don't know what's happening. February, all of the Lauren Blakely books that I read, I absolutely loved. March, not so much. This book followed 2 characters that we met in the Scoring With Him trilogy, so they got their own book, which I was very excited for, and maybe I had too high expectations, I don't know, but either way, it did not quite live up to them. I did enjoy that after River and Owen had been friends for 8 years, they finally decide, because they're both kind of realizing that they have feelings for the other, or at least that they're attracted to one another. They just don't want to risk their friendship. So I like that after 8 years of this like deal that they've had between them, that they will never hook up, they're both kind of like, I think this could actually be more than that though, and they give it a go, and it is cute. It just really wasn't my favorite Lauren Blakely book. Next was the book that I DNF'd, and that is Wicked by E.M. Lindsay. It's the 4th book in her Broken Chains series, and I'm not gonna lie and say that I loved the first 3. It was just, I read the first one, and I was kind of like, well, it's a series, the others have been released, and I kind of want to know what happens, so I just went with the flow. And this hadn't been released yet, so when it came out I decided to give it a go, and I have fallen out of love with this series, I think. Not that I was really ever in it, but the whole darker side of biker gangs and clubs and all that kind of stuff doesn't really appeal to me in romances, unless the romance is stunningly beautiful. I read this book last month. Wow. Okay, this is The Underdog by Briar Prescott. It is book 3 in her Better With You series. I hadn't read book 1 before I read this, which you don't need to, because all of the characters kind of have their own book, and even though they're interconnected, you can read them as standalones. I just read this series so out of order. But this one followed Anders and Wells, who Anders had to look after his younger siblings from a very young age when their mother abandoned them, and he told this little white lie when they were growing up that it was his big dream to do a triathlon, and so for his birthday they buy him, well, they don't really buy him, their present to him is his entry into a triathlon, and he's like, shit, now I actually need to prepare for it. And so he gets hooked up with Wells, who used to be a professional NHL star until he was in an accident where he had to amputate one of his legs. So he's still kind of depressed over that, understandably, and then Anders comes along and he's all this bubbly sunshine guy, and throw them together to try and train for a triathlon. It was kind of adorable. I marked this as having a good character arc. It's a feel-good romance, friends to lovers, grumpy sunshine, opposites attract, and complete strangers, which I loved. I gave it 4.5 stars. This book was just so unexpected. I didn't expect to like it as much as I did. And I loved that at the end of this book, I think it might have been the last chapter or maybe even an epilogue, that the romance between the characters in the next book was set up. So I was so excited to delve into that. That came a little bit later though, so we'll get to that in a minute. Next was a book that I read in my Rating My MM Libraries Romance Novels vlog. If you want to watch that, I'll leave a link to it up here somewhere. And this was Base Instincts by Larissa Ione. I'm not going to go into depth about this since I have a whole vlog about it. I'm just going to say that I really didn't like it. Also, I've just realized these books are completely out of order. I'm just going through my Goodreads like read shelf, and the dates are all screwed up. So we're just gonna wing it. The next book that I read in March was Pushing the Limits by Riley Hart, and this is book 2 in her Secrets Kept series. I'm assuming, I don't know if we're gonna get any more books after this. I hope so though, because I'm loving these characters and her writing in this series is honestly beautiful. I gave this book 4 stars. It is a forbidden relationships stepbrother romance, and let me tell you, I made the horrible decision to start reading this book about 20 minutes before I had to go to work. Why I did that to myself, I have no idea, because I really didn't have time to read it at all, and I had a book hangover from like the first page of the first chapter, and then I had to go work an 8-hour day, and I was like, why did I do this to myself? This book broke my heart. I'm just gonna say, like, there was nothing overly sad or angsty or anything. It was just the emotions that these characters had to deal with, and the way that Riley Hart wrote them just full on broke my heart. And I was like, are you trying to kill me? Because I was not having it. I was not feeling it, but I loved it at the same time. So does that make sense? Okay, I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this. It is a YA book, this next one. It's Gallant by Victoria Schwab. I just saw it while I was at work because it was a new release that we got, and I was like, you know what, sounds interesting. I needed a book to read on my lunch break, and that's kind of how I'm getting through my YA reads at the moment. I read them on my lunch break while I'm at work and don't pick them up any other time. So this is the book that I finished on my break this month at work. Okay, the next 4 books are all from the one series, and that is the Imago series by N.R. Walker. I also spoke about these books in my Rating Libraries MM Romance video, so again, I won't go into depth about them. I'll just say that I loved them so much more than I ever expected to. They definitely made their way onto my favorites list of 2022. So if you haven't read these books yet and you're a fan of N.R. Walker or just feel-good romances, by all means, bypass everything else on your TBR and read these, because they are just so sweet and they make your heart so full. And like 2 books that I don't even think were full length managed to captivate me so much and make my heart so full that I really struggled to let go of these characters, honestly. So that included Imago, which was book 1. Imagines is book 2. We had Red Dirt Heart Imago, which is a crossover with Charlie and Trav from the Red Dirt series, and then Jack and Lawson from the Imago series actually meeting one another. I loved it. Best crossover ever. And then we had Imagos, I'm assuming that's how you say it, which was a 2.6, a little revisit to Lawson and Jack's romance several years after the first couple books, so I loved it. Okay, this is where we delved back into the Briar Prescott books. The next book that I read in March was The Inconvenient Love. This is book 4 in her Better With You series. So at this point in time, we have read 2, 3, and 4 and have yet to read book 1. I rated this 4 stars. I definitely enjoyed it. It is an age gap, best friend's brother romance. There also is a friends to lovers, because these guys have known each other for so many years and it was so beautiful. Also made me a little bit mad in parts, just because characters were being a bit stupid, and I'm like, can you not see how much you both want each other? The next book is The Happy List by Briar Prescott. I finally got around to reading book 1. I knew that I had to do it. I rated it 4 stars, 4, 3.5. It wasn't my favorite out of the series, I will admit. But I kind of enjoyed reading it last, because we did get to see all of the other characters who've already found their happily ever afters before they actually got there, which was very nice to see. I do have to say though, I think that book 2 is my favorite. If you're gonna read one of these books, I would recommend the second one. Okay, next, this book was so totally unexpected, as in how much I loved it. I really didn't expect to. I saw this posted on a Facebook group that I'm a part of several months ago, and added it to my TBR, but was like, I don't really know if I'm gonna read it, because I thought it sounded a bit angsty. It is not. Let me tell you, it is really not. I should probably tell you what it's called, isn't it? It's called Let Me In by Luna David. It is the first book in her The Boys Club series. She was meant to be writing this series with another author. That's why there are no other books in this series yet, and this was published in 2018. But I did post in a Facebook group saying, whoever recommended this to me, I love you and I hate you, because I loved it, but I cried so much in this book. And please tell me, are we going to get any other books in this series? And they did reply to me saying that Luna David is going to be authoring this series by herself now. I'm happy enough with that knowledge. This is an age gap daddy boy romance. It features a first time scene, a good makeup scene. It made me cry so many times despite being low angst, just because of how beautifully it was written and how much what our characters were feeling affected me. I couldn't even relate to it. Like, I'm a straight woman, can't really identify with a gay man in a daddy boy relationship, but the way that Luna David wrote his feelings really impacted me and made me sob so many times. So if you want to cry, I would recommend reading this one. This also made its way onto my favorites list of 2022. We had quite a few of those this month, but overall, if I had to pick a favorite read of March, this book would be it. Like, I loved the characters, I loved the development, I loved the steam. Like, when you think back on it, there probably isn't as much steaminess as there could have been, but I really didn't care in the moment. I was so in it for the story and the romance. There's not a whole lot else to say. So, as we probably know, towards the end of March is when the second Frat Wars book by Saxon James came out, which was Master of Mayhem. But I did want to reread King of Thieves before we delved into that. So I reread Chad and Bailey's story. I loved it just as much as I did the first time around. It was addicting. I loved it. So straight after we finished that, which I rated 5 stars again for the second time, we delved into Master of Mayhem, which focused on Robbie and Brandon, and I absolutely loved it. I loved seeing their relationship shift, because they'd been friends for such a long time. Like, they rushed together. After they're in a relationship, you can see them kind of reflecting and saying that they had seen something in each other when they first became friends, but just assumed it was like a friendship connection, a particular bond between the two of them. And then as they started to become attracted to one another and to grow feelings for one another, you see that part of their friendship starting to shift and grow and mature while still keeping the key aspects of their friendship intact. And it was so beautiful to read. I loved it. Watching them both discover their sexuality and just messing around and having fun with one another was so good to read about. I loved it. And it's also made me so excited for book 3. That is going to be the final book in this series. I think it's called Presidential Chaos. Are you telling me we are going to get a book about Zeke and Charles? Is that what's happening here? The end is in sight. This is the last book that I read in the month of March, and that is His Accidental Daddy by Luna David. After reading Let Me In, I really wanted to read another of her books, and this one appealed to me just by the sound of the blurb. Didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Let Me In. I kind of liked it in the first half, but I'm not gonna lie, I did start skimming it around the 60% mark. There were just so many internal monologues that I kind of got sick of it towards the end of the book and was like, look, I don't really want to put up with it anymore. And I'm kind of interested to see what happens. So I just kind of skimmed through the rest of the book, the last 40%. I don't really feel like we missed out on a whole lot. Once the relationship between our two main characters was established, I feel like nothing else really happened in the rest of the book, which I feel horrible for saying because like this is an author's work, but also want to be honest about my reviews. But anyway, those are all of the books that I read in the month of March. Please let me know down below if you read any of them as well, or if there are any that you might be adding to your TBR after watching this video. I would love to know. Also be sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and that subscribe button down below if you'd like to see some similar content. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like I said in the beginning, my name is Caitlin, and I will see you guys next week with another planned video that won't hurt my brain as much as this one did. Bye.